So this is the book review for the book of Davita's Harp by Chaim Potok. Published by the Alfred A. Knopf Publishing House, American Publishing House. So it was copyrighted in 1985. And you walk into the book and you see it says to the mother. So obviously he wrote that to, I guess, people that he was connected with. And it has different books. You can clearly see that it's already a little bit old style in that regard. And this is based off the girl, and she's Davita. So Elana Davita, that's her name. And her mother was from Poland and had a really difficult situation growing up, being a what they call a Hasidic Jew. And her mother had a really bad, as we clearly see in the book, that she had a really bad experience. We don't know exactly what happened. It was during the times of the pogroms, times of the Cossacks, and it seems to me that she was probably raped. We don't really see that, but from the book, it seems more and more that she was, God forbid, raped. And she didn't feel comfortable at home. She didn't feel comfortable with her father, because clearly, I guess, he was not comfortable with the fact that this happened to her. Her grandfather saves her and was beaten up because of it. And her sister was killed. So they all went through this terrible situation. But it's something also that we're going to go through to really discuss, like, does it really make sense that, if a person, God forbid, is raped, they're not going to be welcomed into the community? So that's not really, there's two aspects here. One is what was a long time ago expected in certain towns, because everyone gets affected by their neighborhood. Even though you can say the Jews were in the shtetls and they were attacked constantly by the Cossacks and by pogroms and by everything that you could imagine all the time. They were second-class citizens. They were not special. They were not considered anything special. But yet we see that she was very, very affected because her father didn't feel that she was, I guess, good enough in his eyes. And that is not a Torah perspective. And a lot of this book is going to explain things that it seems, oh my gosh, is that what the Torah brings? Is that what the Torah really says? And then is it, no, that's not what the Torah says. That is something that is a separate thing. This is something that is just about what a person feels for that time. So that has a huge impact. But that's just how... reading so many books over the years, it just didn't strike me as something that was realistic. So she also talks about her family, the mother's family, not being accepting of this relationship. See that they didn't want her to give up everything of her Judaism. This is what they knew. And there was something special about being Jewish and getting to know your heritage and your culture and your religion. And throughout the whole book, there is this conflict of, does religion is it just like a problem in the way, or is it something that is special in one's life? And so it is absolutely special in one's life. As we see, the Torah was given by God to Moshe. So we clearly see that that's a very important thing. We also understand that other religions, even though they're man-made, it is special for a person, as long as it's belief in one God, it is special for a person to have that in their life. There's something beyond that person. There's something beyond him or her. There is something more than that. It talks about constantly moving around to different apartments where they never even felt comfortable. She talks about the local street gang, when everyone's finding out that she is a Jewish mother and then a non-Jewish father. It's something really a big deal, because it was unheard of back then. That's not something that people did. Everyone was more religious, and as much as you can be friends and spend time together as families, it's a whole different story when one of you have to compromise your religion. And that's what happens. If there is no religion in the house, that's never really true. You always have some form of something. People call it a holiday time, but whose holiday are you celebrating? Are you celebrating Hanukkah, or are you celebrating, Xmas? What are you celebrating? It's not so simple as people want to tell you. Those situations where it became so difficult because they did not share the same religion. She talks about the harp, which is called Davita's Harp, and it's like this little harp symbol on the door, and it makes all these beautiful chimes, and it's the music that they didn't have, the piano that they never had. Is this aunt that comes, and her name was Aunt Sarah, and she would come, and she was very, very religious, and she always tried to push her religious views. So if she was a non-Jewish person that was pushing her religious non-Jewish views onto the girl Davita, and it was constantly filling her mind with religious things. And the mother at the time didn't want to deal with religion from her own past because she went through so much, and people are going to kill Jews whether you're a religious Jew or not a religious Jew. They're going to kill you because you're Jewish, sadly. And certain things in certain situations, her father didn't know how to react well to. But her grandfather stood up for her. So if they're both religious men, then how come you're choosing all religion? So it's not so simple and it's not so easy. But what ends up happening is because you have that, something that if a non-Jewish person would not appreciate Jewish rituals in his house, just like a Jewish person is not going to appreciate non-Jewish rituals in their house. It goes both ways. And here she was in the house, the aunt, constantly telling stories of her religion, of their savior, of how that works in their mind. And that has a huge, terrible impact on the child. It left her completely confused because during times of hardship, she would sit there kneeling, as you would if you were not Jewish. She was kneeling as if in prayer. And then you'll find her times she's always going to the shul. She doesn't even know why. She doesn't even know, what's the reasoning. But that is what's happening. There is a nurse, and she's helping out people, and she really has a big heart to help. But again, she wants to influence Davita into becoming more what she expects from her. We also see that Chana, her mother, it's only called Chana when Jewish people are talking to her, because the mother adopted her own secular name, Annie. And the reason that she adopted that name, to see her husband calls her that, is because she wants to move so far away from her Judaism, feeling so hurt, and she doesn't even know how to express it, with what happened in her life. Parents were very into, they're pro-communists, and they're very into trying to make meetings and give out pamphlets of how they felt that America should be run. Something that they chose, which they happen to not like capitalism, and therefore they wanted to put their views on as many people as possible. And one of the saddest things that I thought about when I was reading this book is that the mother, in her desire to spread her belief of communist, that to her that was like her religion, but she would drag her little daughter to every little place, to every little thing. And they would go and meet with people that looked more like a rougher crowd. And she absolutely didn't care that she's exposing not only herself, but her daughter. Late train-wise, and then she has school the next day. And she doesn't even ask her what's going on in her school, what's happening here, what's happening there. She just was simply all about herself. Any love, even care about, how was your day? How are things going? You just don't hear about it. Like her daughter so many times was bullied. And it was scary. And you just don't even hear about it from the mother. You're like, this is supposed to be a Jewish mother. Even if she's not believing in everything, you always say a Jewish mother is a Jewish mother. And she just didn't portray that way to me at all. It was just, she always would have this dictionary with her mother, and she'd ask her mother what the words religious meant. And she said, it came from this old word that meant to bind, to tie. Religious people feel bound to their ideas, she said. And obviously that's not really, of course we feel bound to our religion, but it's much more than that. It's about connecting to Hashem. It's about connecting, of course, to God. We're connecting, we want this relationship with God. We want to do what's right. And so it's much more different than just being, when you say bound, you feel like you're tied down to something. Like you have to lug something around. It's like, it's a tragedy. You have no choice. And so clearly we can see already that her mother just can't stand the fact that her daughter's asking such a question. Then there was this Uncle Jacob who would come, and he would talk about his beautiful stories that he was writing, and he had a good friendship with Alana Davita, who was able to, and I believe later on as she's writing the stuff that she writes, we see clearly that it's something special that he instilled in her about writing. So she meets him, he's very interesting, he stays up all night to write, something very, very beautiful. And Alana Davita doesn't really understand what she wants from her own life. She kind of is at that point where she's still repeating whatever her parents are telling her. And as we see with parents, it has such a huge impact on a child to, what you say to your child matters. How you react with your child matters. How you're going to, your mood matters. So if you're in a bad mood, don't share that to your kid. So this is something clear that we see. Teresa, she's in the bathroom sitting there on the floor, and we find out later that her mother didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to explain it, and we find out that she was raped. And she was traumatized because she was in this area of the world where they were having war, and it was something that was so obviously traumatic, and her mother didn't want to deal with it. That's something that taboo subject that people didn't talk about, which was so sad because we realized her own mother was raped. And instead of sharing with her daughter this, giving it a viewpoint that this is totally a terrible thing and what could someone do and how we can share with the person who's suffering, instead she was just quiet. She couldn't share. She pretended she didn't even, understand what's really going on. And I felt that was really a shame because kids do what kids do, which they're going to Google it anyway, as we see in our generations. And back then they went to the library and they would go and find out anyway. And she'd check up the dictionary and she couldn't understand really what these words meant. So it's a huge, huge deal on her. And book 2, it talks about there's no real time frame of what's going on. So again, it's hard to follow. And I feel like in the book, there's just so much going on with us having to know what's happening to keep up with the book. And I felt that was a huge issue, that there was no dates at all to explain that to us. And that's a problem. Daughter, Alana, that way most of the time we can forget the loneliness. I learned that from my mother. And so she's talking to her daughter about her father going away and that she had loneliness. And she goes, yeah, my father was a member of a group of very religious Jews called Hasidim. He used to go away almost every Saturday and holiday to the city where the Rebbe, the leader of the group, lived. And basically she said that was a tragedy for her mother. But when their father, when the kid, Alana's father, went away, it was like, well, it's okay. And he went away for months, barely in touch, which is just not even a letter, not even a something. Very rarely. And that's all explained, because he has important work to do. So again, it's a knock at religion, where if you're religious and you want to go to the synagogue, or if someone who's non-Jewish wants to go to the church, that's totally not acceptable to a lot of people as a considered a special thing to do, because it has to be if you're a journalist. Also a strange thing that the author put in, which I felt was very not natural again, which this cousin all of a sudden is attracted to her. And even if she's beautiful, and yeah, they're probably second cousins because their parents are cousins, it was weird that she had throughout the book that her and this boy are somewhat attracted to each other. And they're cousins, and it shouldn't be a thing like that. It's like a natural thing, You're not going to be attracted to your best friend's brother or whatever it is. It's not a normal thing that I felt this author was putting in the book, and I felt that it kind of ruined it. A lot of this is what the author can't differentiate between what is truly religious, like observant, what the Torah is really saying, and people following the Torah, or what was it like back then, so long ago, from the old countries of how people acted. And a lot of people don't even realize that there's this divide in Judaism called Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. Absolutely, it's just really everyone is Jewish, and people go according to their own way of forgetting. Everyone during this time, they all went through so much. They all told her what he wanted to tell her about Wesley Everett, and we found out later on that it was a much more gruesome story than the father told her, and it was terrible. And the mother's reaction again was very childish in my mind, because this person was castrated, and the mother didn't figure out a way to ever, even if at the moment the mother doesn't know what to say, she has an obligation as a parent to go and sit down with her child and say, listen, you found this out in a way, you heard it from your father, or you heard this, you read this from the library, let's discuss it, let's figure it out, let's make this topic, whatever you want to talk about it, let's figure out a way how we can talk about this. There never was a Jewish perspective. Plenty of religions talk about women, they lump it with children. That's not that's not a Jewish perspective. Sadly, in the book, the author did not know, and it was very misguided, of what the role of a Jewish woman is, and therefore we see that he has all these questions and he has no real answers, so they come out through his writing. And when it comes to a person who's Jewish and who's non-Jewish, majority of people have views on religion. They do. That's just put into how they're raised. And so that she's a huge impact. And whenever she takes 10 steps forward, she slides way back down. She's falling down the hill because she is distracted by so many other influences in her life. And so I think that makes it very difficult. We get down to the book 3, and modern history professor at Brooklyn College, and she wants to move to Chicago with him. And then again we see Ezra comes to her and says, you can't do this twice. You can't basically marry out of the faith twice. And what about your daughter? And you're going to be moving so far away. Again, it was something that he was worried for her, because it did have an impact when she got married the first time. As much as she was in love with her husband who passed away, there is so many things that not being a part of having friends in your life, having religion in your life, having your culture in your life, has a huge impact on a person. And so he's trying to tell her, don't do this. Meanwhile, her daughter comes out of her room and says, please don't. Basically, the first time we see her actually stand up to her mother and say, please don't shop me to another state. Because she knows exactly what that's going to mean. She knows her mother's going to be gone with this guy all the time and who knows what. And she's going to be living all by herself in Chicago where she knows nobody. And so this time she said, please, I don't want you to marry this guy, or just leave me here with someone else. Don't take me with. And so eventually we see that the mother decides to not marry this guy. And she falls into a deeper depression. And eventually her mother became so sick and was dying of loneliness, as it said. And a lot of it is that a real disease? I think that there's so many things that are pushed upon a person that it becomes extremely difficult. And therefore there is this loneliness and this sadness and this grief that she is experiencing. But I believe at the same time that she says she's a strong woman. And yet I still feel that how is she helping herself? All she's doing by not helping herself, someone else has to come in and help her. But that's not showing strength in a way. She tried to at least go get help. And we saw how, again, her daughter's left behind, and she goes to Aunt Sarah, and Aunt Sarah takes care of her. And again, we continue to see the uncle always in her life. And then something weird happens, and I don't think it's realistic, but all these years later, she falls in love with her cousin. And he agrees to marry her, which I don't even know why he would marry her, because, he just sees that you're bringing a person to be the wife to your son, you're religious, you're observant, and you want to have that culture and tradition and Judaism in your house. You're going to this woman who's your cousin who has no love at this point in her life for religion, for God, for anything. She doesn't even know what she wants. And then they're getting married. And I thought that was just so not realistic, such a mistake on both of their part, because even though miraculously she wants to go to do all these things and she's learning, but it's just so backward. That's not a normal thing that anyone, especially during those times, would do. It would never be accepted. Then her daughter's asking all these questions, and she's starting to learn more, and she wants to get the Akiva award, which is only given to the boys. And she's asking, are a woman allowed to pray? And in the book it says, no, women don't need to pray. They're not required to, and that is actually false. Women are required to pray. It is something men and women have to pray in Judaism. Women have, because of all of their requirements of taking care of the future generations, a woman does not have the same prayers as a man. She has to pray. There's 3 prayers a day. She prays the first prayer and the second prayer, but not the third prayer. She can if she wants, but it's a different story. And so we see that there are plenty of times throughout this book that feeling of, you're just a woman, you're just a girl, you mean nothing to God, nothing to being a part of the backward religious synagogue. But that's not true. Not understanding that we see from the author that makes it so toxic in this book when you see this beautiful girl asking all these questions and never really finding proper answers, because we see that the author is giving his own feelings on this, and he never really gets anywhere. It goes in circles. People didn't write the Torah. God dictated the Torah to Moshe. We all know this. So again, it's this put in here in this book, twisted around to make it seem as if it's a man-made religion, and giving the excuse of, it's just, that's what some rabbis thought long ago. And it's just not true. It's not true. It's God made. And it was written down, and we see this even documented how certain things were written down, the more things were written down, and more things were written down. So it's not what they say. And again, it's just showing this contrast of, the women are better than men, but really the world couldn't handle it, basically. They have men and women together in this school. And so a real religious school will be separate. The boys will be separate and the girls will be separate, because they have two different types of learning. Doesn't mean one is better than the other. They have lots of learning together that are shared. Not together as boys and girls, but lots of learning that they do that is shared. And learning for what works for what woman. You keep saying in the book, there's no bar mitzvah and she just has her period and that's her life. No, it's not at all. A woman has a bas mitzvah, and everyone knows that. And there's a special party for her and special things that she does on her special day. Just like a man has special things at his special day. And the fact that she has her period should be celebrated. Not like, again, she's suffering. It's not true. She should be celebrated, the fact that she has that ability, that potential to give life. So it's something that is very special. That again is put aside because the mentality of the world is, this is a male-made world and you have to fit into the male system of working, the work relationship system. But that's really wrong. We're only having it through a lens of, this is a man-made religion. Really, they try to say it's God-made, but it's really man-made. It's not true. And it makes a problem, because a person who's looking for real answers, they're going to find real answers. But sadly, a lot of these books, people who just want to go on what they heard all their life, maybe they're bouncing off ideas in their own circle of friends, whatever it is, they're not looking for real answers, because real answers can definitely be found. And it has this weird thing about them looking at each other because they're living in the same house. And it's just weird, because if you have any teenage boy, naturally looks at girls. So I guess he's putting that in here, but I found it very strange, because it almost made it the impression to me that only the ultra-Orthodox boys are really the perverts, and they're being careful not to look at me, but yet they're really thinking of me all the time. And again, that's just a stereotype. It's just, bashing those who are trying really hard in their own life to be godly and be connected to Hashem. Again, I feel that if you take any teenage boy nowadays, most of them already were intimate. So that whole concept of it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way of, why did the author have to put this in here? It could have just been a very beautiful friendship that they had, but they have to add in this weird part of them being attracted to each other in a not nice way, of how they put about how she's feeling and how he goes overboard, and how the mother is feeling, and the girl thinks about her mother having relations with her new father, as he calls himself. And it's just weird. It's like, it didn't need to be in there. And I feel that's why that's the difference between a male writer writing about women and trying to understand women, which men can never do, than a woman writer who really can express the viewpoint of how young girls feel. There's so much more depth to them than a regular boy that age. There's a difference. Boys develop later than girls. And so she wouldn't have this immaturity. I feel like it was just very misplaced. I really thought that she was going to gothically kill herself, because it was such a nasty, almost ending, like she's talking to her father and to the people that passed away. And she's imagining this beach. And I thought for a moment that she was going to, God forbid, hurt herself. And thank God she didn't. And her mother ends up having a child with Ezra. They end up having a child together. And so she has a little sister now, and it's very, very special. But I feel like it really just doesn't fit in very, very well, because it's not realistic after everything her mother suffered with for her mother to have a healthy baby. It seems impossible. And also her mother's age, and it all didn't seem realistic at all. So those are overall going through the book, noticing all those points, and at the same time realizing there's just sadly that the author is suffering from his own childhood, I'm assuming, going through his own questions in life, and decided to use those questions perhaps as put it as in a girl form in a book, because it sells better as a woman. But I feel because he's not a woman, he's not a little girl, he has no clue what he's talking about, and I feel that ruins it, because when you are a woman and a Jewish woman wanting to read this beautiful book, and you're like, that just didn't sit well with me, that just wasn't realistic. No girl at this age is going to care, she's going to have a grudge against her mother, even if she's the best girl in the world, because her mother, made so many mistakes. And, it was a terrible, in a lot of ways, it was a tragedy. So I definitely felt that there's a lot to think about in the book. But at the same time, there was parts of it that absolutely did not seem realistic to me. And I just hope you enjoyed it.